This is the Life with Grief podcast, the podcast that talks about and normalizes the complexities of grief, life after loss, and all this entails, and so much more. I want you to think of this podcast as a safe space where I'm a friendly face and we're just journeying through this together to figure out how to live life with our grief in tow. I'm your host, Tara Accardo. I'm a grief and transformational life coach, and I'm here to serve you guidance, support, tangible coping tools, inspiration, and some laughs along the way to help you cultivate a more meaningful, intentional, and beautiful life. But grieving or not, we're getting into countless topics here on the podcast, from coping with loss to self-development and so much more. I'm so grateful you're here. Let's dive right in. Hello, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Life with Grief podcast. I'm your host, Tara Accardo, and today's topic I've been wanting to cover for a long time, not only because this is something that I really have and continue to struggle with sometimes in my grieving journey, and actually really just outside of my grieving journey as well, but it's really been just a theme that has made itself known in my life recently, and perhaps yours too. And I think it's a really important thing to talk about. And I want this conversation today just for you to think of it as yes, we can apply this to our grief however you see fit. But really, this is sort of a larger conversation today because, again, on this podcast, I not only want to give you tools to help you along with your grief, but just to live a more beautiful, fulfilled, calm, peaceful life, all the good things, right? And what we're covering today, I think, is a really, really important and critical piece of that, just to find that on a daily basis, that calm, that peace I always talk about. So today we are diving into the world of ruminating thoughts, understanding them, understanding why they happen. And you know me, I love some good coping tools. I never want to leave you empty-handed if I can avoid it. So I'm giving you 12 very high-level ways to begin coping with ruminating thoughts just a little bit better today, to hopefully help you along in this experience and just, again, leave you with a little peace, some semblance of peace, just to get you going in the right direction. And this topic, especially for me lately, I'll talk a little bit about this in this episode, but has just been very close to my heart. There are a couple people in my very close circle that are just going through some things, and they're really dealing with this in a very big way right now. So if you are struggling with ruminating thoughts, whatever they are related to, maybe it's something with your job, maybe it is something with your grief, maybe it's something with your kids or your partner or your health, your identity, whatever it is, I just invite you to listen to this with an open heart and with an open mind today. Consider how you could apply this to whatever situation you're in right now. Like I said, this episode really kind of goes beyond our grief, but I'm really, really excited to talk about it because this is definitely something I've been through myself. And I really think it's just such an important key to unlocking just a little more joy and tranquility in our life. So what are ruminating thoughts? Let's just start there. They are repetitive, intrusive, and often very distressing thoughts that can really dominate our mind and our thought process. And it just makes it so difficult to focus on literally anything else in life right now. And it's just this never-ending loop in our head. And when we ruminate, we often keep replaying past events or worrying about things that haven't happened yet, or maybe won't even happen. Maybe it just is not even a logical thing, but we just cannot get out of this vicious cycle and out of this loop. However this looks for you, this can make us feel very overwhelmed and very anxious. And it can also really have a negative impact on our self-esteem and just, again, how we make decisions, how we just navigate day-to-day life and keeping our sanity through it all. And these ruminating thoughts often involved dwelling on negative experiences, worrying about future events. Those people in my close circle that I mentioned, this is the category they fall into, and replaying past mistakes over and over and over again. And I feel like with grievers that I talk to, that's really where a lot of us are stuck. It's those coulda, woulda, shouldas. It's the things we wish we would have done. It's the things we wish we would have said. And that's horrible to have to live with, right? And it's very valid. But where rumination gets tricky is, again, it leaves us stuck in that cycle of negative thinking and repetitive thoughts. And it can really affect our mental health. It can increase our stress. It can make us feel sad or angry, of course. It impacts our ability to concentrate and make decisions, all the things. But understanding what rumination is at its core and where specifically your ruminating thoughts are coming from can really help us just take a little bit of control back and break free from it a little bit. And then just, again, overall improve your well-being. So let's break this down a little bit. If you ruminate, or if you are experiencing these ruminating thoughts, you are more likely to focus on negative events from the past and perhaps blame yourself for them. You see current events, typically in a more negative way, or you might feel more helpless about the future, or hopeless about the future, I should say. And it's not cut and dry here, okay, you guys? So it's not that you have to fall into one of those three categories. I have coached people and I have seen people in my own personal life that, there's some gray area with all of that. Maybe there's some ruminating thoughts that someone's having, but it's actually not over something they did. Maybe it's over something someone else did, or I hate even putting this out there, but this is the reality for some people. Maybe your loved one died at the hands of someone else and you just cannot get out of this loop of anguish, perhaps even of hatred, right? Like, these are very real and very raw things that so many of us have to cope with. So I just want to throw this out there. A lot of gray area here, but let's talk about why these ruminating thoughts happen in the first place. First and foremost, they are not random. And you probably know this, but I have spoken with people in my world that are sometimes confused by their ruminating thoughts, or they're just like, I just don't know where this comes from. I just don't know. I don't know. They always have underlying causes and triggers somewhere along the line. They don't typically just come up for no reason. So some reasons that these ruminating thoughts can occur is unresolved issues or grief. So when we have these unresolved conflicts or problems, our minds naturally want to find solutions. It wants to find logic. It wants to find that peace. But when solutions or some resolve is not readily available, our minds can get stuck in that loop, trying essentially to solve the unsolvable. Another aspect here is facing ongoing stressors that you can't control. This is so exhausting, you guys. I see this so often, and this can come in a lot of different packages, but rumination often stems from previous negative experiences. Some of these experiences we can't change, but we can change how we look at them. And that's what I'm hoping to help you do just a little bit today. For example, just using a non-death related situation here. Let's say you didn't get that job that you really wanted. Okay, let's reframe our thoughts. Let's think about this. Could you revamp your resume and give it another go, if not with that job, with another job? Or, maybe you've made a mistake and there's just some owning of that you need to do. Or if it wasn't a mistake, maybe it was just like a bad experience in general, maybe in that job or whatever the situation is. Can you take steps to stop that from happening again? What is within your control? Sometimes, I hate to say this flippantly, but sometimes it's not a you problem. Sometimes it's a them problem. Sometimes it's a reflection on someone else. Not always the case. I think it's good that we have this self-awareness. This is where the self-awareness comes into play. And it's really good that we go inward and do our introspection and really look at this from a lens of, okay, what is within my control here? Okay, let me start there. And if there's anything out of your control, that's where action steps just need to be taken. There are a lot of people that I have helped along the way that have these ruminating thoughts, and what they're ruminating on are things that are just completely out of their control. It might be like a health related situation, or it's the way that someone's acting, or it's a death that you cannot go back and change. So delineating that, okay, this is within my control. This is me saying I did everything I could, or I am doing everything I can with what I'm equipped with. Okay, this is everything that is out of my control. That's a good place to start, right? Because at the end of the day, we can lay our head on the pillow and feel good about us and feel good about what we're doing. So just understanding what is within our control versus what is out of it. And that can really just help us be more realistic about how we approach things, and ultimately, hopefully, take some of the pressure off in the process, right? So number 3 here, perfectionism and or people pleasing. I want to just mention that there's people that I work with, that I coach, often my life coaching clients, that have those people pleasing tendencies. They have that, I don't even want to say type A, just that need to be perfect. But it really, and I don't want to say that is not a bad thing, especially those type A people. If you're listening, I'm a little type A too in some ways. We need those people in our lives, right? But not at the expense of your peace. And those perfectionists out there, I'm also talking to you. So people with perfectionistic tendencies, it's a tough word, often ruminate on their perceived failures or their mistakes and replay scenarios in their minds to understand what went wrong or how they could have done better. And I want to say here, I don't think that's a bad, this is purely my opinion here. I don't think that's a bad thing. Again, this is good. It's good to have that self-awareness. It's good to be introspective and be like, okay, like it's good to reflect. Where we want to be cautious is not allow it to go into this ruminating thought process where it's like all we can think about and we're beating ourselves up, and it takes such a toll on our physical and mental health, you guys. So I just want to mention that. So again, for you perfectionists, for you people pleasers, that point is for you. Really, again, it comes back a lot into what is within your control. And I think for you guys especially, it's understanding that we're all human. We all can't be 100% all the time, and failures and mistakes will happen. There are times where we can't please everyone, and sometimes we just have to show up for ourselves. So, number 4 here, stress and anxiety. High levels of stress and anxiety can really trigger these ruminating thoughts and this ruminative thinking. The brain becomes hyper-focused on potential threats or negative outcomes. Think, survival mode here. And that makes it really difficult to shift attention away from those thoughts. Someone in my life, I'll just quickly share this example. They are not officially diagnosed, I will say that, but they have hypochondriac tendencies. And I see this a lot where their brain becomes hyper-focused on the potential threat of them being ill, or if a perceived illness or a illness, a cancer or whatever, were to come their way, how it would affect their life and the lives of their loved ones around them. And this shows up in the form of stress and anxiety. But the thing with stress and anxiety is, again, we're on this vicious loop. It's like the more we have it, the more dysregulation it causes in the body. And so we are just shot emotionally, physically, because it can manifest in physical symptoms. It just wreaks absolute havoc on the body. So in some of the coping tools we'll look at today, it will help with that stress anxiety piece of it. Obviously, ruminating thoughts can cause stress and anxiety, but I just want to also mention that can be a source of our ruminating thoughts as well. Hopefully you guys got the differentiation there. But to continue on with my little list here, number 5, trauma. Of course, trauma can contribute to ruminating thoughts. Past traumatic experiences can lead to those thoughts as the mind tries to process and make sense of what happened. Y'all, this was so me. This is, I would say, out of everything I'm kind of sharing right now, this is really where I found myself with my parents and my parents' deaths. When it comes to their treatment, how I showed up for them, days where I felt like I was maybe a little bit mentally checked out or too focused on work or too focused on the wrong thing. You guys, we're so often in survival mode ourselves, especially when we are watching a loved one die, maybe die in front of us. We're dealing with anticipatory grief. I mean, this trauma, there's no limit here, right? I just want to make it clear that across the board, trauma can make it particularly challenging as these ruminating thoughts often evoke very strong emotional responses, rightfully so. So I think it's getting the right help. And we're going to touch on that, so I won't spoil my later coping tools, but just wanted to call out trauma absolutely can contribute to these ruminating thoughts. Hey, my friend, are you needing some relief from your grief? If so, I have an exciting new offering that will help you get exactly that. My 14-day Relief in Your Grief challenge brings you powerful, impactful, bite-sized daily content alongside the perfect meditation. One of the biggest struggles I hear from my members, clients, and people on social media is that they just need some relief from the stress, sadness, and pain that grief and loss can cause. But here's the thing. So many people are lost and unsure about where to start. This can feel like a huge thing to tackle, so we are doing it together, and we're starting with just 14 days. Give me 2 weeks and I will help you begin to take that anxiety, heartache, and anguish and turn it into peace, clarity, and hope as you move forward with your grief. Seriously, what do you have to lose by joining? Challenge your grief and give yourself some relief, my friend. I have no doubt this 14 days will be an inspiring, uplifting, perspective-changing experience for you. Join now through the link in the show description. So last on my list here are cognitive patterns. Some people may have cognitive patterns that predispose them to ruminating thinking. So this can include, a tendency to focus on negative information, difficulty with emotional regulation, a habit of overanalyzing a situation. The list goes on. And I definitely have some examples of people in my life that it's a little bit of generational trauma going on, just to use this as an example, where, it's a learned behavior, or they had a parent that tends to focus on the negative, or in fact, the person in my life that has those hypochondriac tendencies, they also have a parent who has, if they are not a diagnosed hypochondriac, they have those tendencies as well. With hypochondria, it doesn't typically come from nowhere. So we've seen it before, or, there was a situation in our life where there was maybe a close call or something like that. So apply this to whatever situation you're in, but these cognitive patterns, whether witnessed and observed or learned over time, overall, we might get stuck in those negative thoughts, right? That negative information, and we just approach things with just overarching negativity, or they are just not well emotionally regulated, or there's something they have to work through there, or they just tend to overanalyze things. And then here we are with those ruminating thoughts. So that all being said, and I mean, again, you guys, I want to preface this. This is a high-level conversation. I want to mention I'm not a therapist, right? I am just a grief and life coach over here. I have experience with ruminating thoughts on my own, but I just want to mention, right, that this is as much encompassing as I could get for this conversation. Also, for the sake of time, I'm sure there's a lot of detail we could go into here, but generally speaking, that is often where, if you kind of think of it as buckets, where ruminating thoughts can stem from. So let's shift gears here a little bit and talk about how the heck do we cope with this? Coping with ruminating thoughts involve typically a combination of strategies to interpret this vicious cycle. Like I said, understanding where it's coming from, managing stress and anxiety over it, and ultimately reframing those thinking patterns. So for the purposes of today's rather short conversation, this again will be high level for now, but certainly more to come in the future on this topic, I think, because this is a big one in terms of, again, taking control back and just not allowing these ruminating thoughts to overcome us. And it's not like control is like the ultimate goal here. What I mean by control is just, it's a process with these ruminating thoughts. And in my experience and with the individuals that I've helped through this. So I just want to start this off by saying, just being very realistic about that. They're not going to go away overnight, probably. If they do, more power to you. That's amazing. But patience with yourself and with this process is key. Getting the right help is key. We're about to get into that. But when I talk about control, it's really just empowering yourself and having the courage and the knowledge that you do have power over these thoughts, and you might need some support and you might need some guidance and the right tools to get you there. But ultimately, you are in control. And I know it feels like we aren't so often with these ruminating thoughts. So I just want to encourage you. I just want to leave you with those words of wisdom. Like, I don't want to sugarcoat this and be like, you've got this, but I do just want to, again, inspire where and how I can. And hopefully these 12 coping techniques that I'm about to give you help with this. But I just want you to know that today. And I want you to believe it, that the power is within your hands. I want to do nothing but empower you here on this podcast. And anyway, I just want to leave you with that before we get into this. And just know that you are loved and you are supported and you are worthy of getting these ruminating thoughts under control once and for all. So with that, let's get into these coping tools. So mindfulness and meditation and grounding. One of the easiest things that you can incorporate into your daily life. Someone very close to me, dealing with some health stuff, going through some things, they have even told me, like, hey, I started incorporating meditation into my routine, into my life more regularly. And by regularly, I mean at least once a day. And they are already feeling the difference, or they are already saying to me, like, I have already felt less stress, or, oh, I tend to feel better when I meditate and when I allow that time for grounding and that mindfulness of, like, even just like literally getting in touch with their five senses. Okay, this is what is around me. This is what is true. This is my present moment. So again, it's just bringing that awareness to the present moment that ultimately, when done properly, reduces the power of these ruminating thoughts. So again, techniques like deep breathing, right? If you're having anxiety or a panic attack, what do? At minimum, you take deep breaths, the box breaths in for 3 or 4, holding that, and out for 3 or 4. That is often how I start my coaching sessions with people, right? It's to get into the right headspace. And with ruminating thoughts, we can be all up in here. And if you are not watching the video version of this, I'm like, my hands are going crazy above my head right now because that's what these thoughts can feel like. So again, deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, guided meditation, all particularly helpful and a relatively easy place to start. Number 2 here, I've touched on this a little bit already, so I won't go into too much detail here, but again, just determining what you can and can't change. Speaking to my grievers here listening for a second, which if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are one. If we can't go back and change a death, right? If the death already happened, if they are gone, I do not subscribe to the 5 stages, so I don't even want to use the term acceptance here. There is a resignation that has to happen that they are gone. And it's just a fact. It's not that you have to be okay with that, right? I'm never going to be okay with the fact that my parents and dog died, right? Or any of my other loved ones that have passed away over the years. But can I change it? Can I bring them back? No, I can't. And that also means I can't go back and change the coulda, woulda, shouldas. I can't really do anything about how I wish I had shown up differently or whatever it is. Again, it's not that we have to feel okay with that, but with time, there is a resignation to the fact that that is your reality. You cannot change that. But there are things that we can change. So moving forward, I learned a lot from those situations and how I did or didn't show up the way that I wanted to. And looking back on it, you guys, I've been so hard on myself, and I even know that the things that I think about or the things that I ruminate about are not even things that my parents would be like, Tara, it's all good. You were doing what you could at the time. Like, release this, let it go. And so tapping into what our loved ones would say, or just recognizing that so often we're just doing the best we can with what we are given. So I don't want to blanket statement that one too much. I know everyone's situation is very different, and some might be far more traumatic, and I want to hold space for all of us here today. But ultimately, that determination, it really comes down to that, of what you can change and what you can't, right? So number 3 in my little list of coping tools, revisiting our thoughts and changing our perspective. Honestly, you guys, there is so much I could say here. This is like a whole nother podcast episode, so I will just keep this brief for now. We often ruminate when we think we've made a mistake, maybe spoken out of turn, or maybe said or did something silly or like embarrassing even, or believe that we are responsible for something bad that has happened. If you can put a thought into perspective, a different perspective, or even just being very honest with yourself for a moment, you might find that it's actually inaccurate or really not very logical. And that's where we have to recognize that, and then we shift it. If you have made a mistake at work, for example, it might be helpful to consider what effect your perceived mistake has in reality. Recall when something like this has happened before and how it turned out. Take steps to own up to your mistake if you legitimately made one, and correct the error. And of course, apologize if it's appropriate. Again, that's just a work mistake, and it's not always, again, this is not black and white here, okay? There are certain situations require different things. But ultimately, it really is taking a step back, taking a moment, taking a breath, and saying, okay, how is this actually altering the reality or the lives of the people around me? And let's say there was something that has happened before, and let's say it didn't turn out well. Remember that just because it turned out XYZ way that time, this is a new and a different situation. That does not mean it's going to turn out the same way again, right? Fates are different. Situations are different. And if there really is something that we coulda, woulda, shoulda done differently, we own up to it. We take that accountability, we have that awareness, and we carry that with us moving forward. Sort of like in the last point that I just mentioned, with the ways or the things that I wish I had done differently with my parents, or even outside of my parents' deaths. Maybe it's things with work, or things with my daughter, or with my husband, or whoever it might involve in my life. All I can do, if I can't go back and change something, if I can't go back and literally change a moment in time, all I can do is learn from that and promise myself and show up for myself and doing it differently moving forward. It is the biggest lesson in learning from our mistakes and how it changes us as a person, and it can change us for the better. It can change us positively. And not that that's, I just want to touch on grief and like loss for a second. It's not that losses have to happen in order to teach us something. It's not about the lesson. It's not about like what it teaches us. It's just kind of almost analyzing that situation and saying like, okay, well, I can't go back and change it. This is what I wish I would have done differently. God, I wish so badly I could change and go back and do things differently for that person, but I can't. So all I can do is sort of redeem myself. It's a redemption story a little bit, right? Give it the power to make you a better, more well-rounded, more supportive, more compassionate, more empathetic, whatever it is, person. Because the thing is, we have to remember that everyone makes mistakes in life and that things that are out of our control are a part of life. That includes death, that includes getting let go from a job, that includes mistakes that we make on a daily basis, big or small. 2 important reminders here, though. It is better to sort a mistake, if there's legitimately a mistake, better to sort it out early if it needs sorting out at all, right? That's going to bring you some peace. Acknowledge it. Do not run away from it. Don't pretend like it didn't happen. And number 2, give yourself grace. You are human and you are going through really real, really raw, really human things. Okay? So, number 4, work on building up and enhancing your self-esteem. Many people who ruminate or have ruminating thoughts report difficulties with self-esteem. And in fact, studies have shown that there may actually be a link between a lack of self-esteem and a tendency to ruminate. So just a few quick ways, very high level again today, of enhancing your self-esteem could be reviewing and appreciating your strengths and building on them. So taking a moment to acknowledge yourself every day, loving on yourself and being like, okay, here's what I'm good at. This is what sparks joy for me. This is where I shine. Okay, let me appreciate that about myself. And how can you incorporate more of that into your life currently? Also, trusting yourself. This can be hard. And sometimes when I say out loud, like, what does it mean to sort of trust yourself? It's trusting your thoughts. It's trusting your decisions. It's trusting that you're treating yourself and others the right way. So just, again, check in with yourself on a daily basis. And the third, just again, quick tip that I have here, and this is sort of related, is having a practice or even mantras every day that build upon this self-love and self-esteem and trust, and living up to that trust. So where trust is concerned, for example, if you say you're going to do something either for yourself or someone else, do it. Follow through. You will start to build that trust more within your life in doing that. And just to touch on the mantras really quick, some that I love, they can be so simple. You can make up your own, you can find some online, but it can be whatever you want to say. You know, I am courageous, I am intelligent, I am capable, I am worthy, right? Worthy of peace and love and a happy, beautiful life despite anything and everything that you've been through. So again, self-esteem piece, very big here. Number 5, cognitive behavioral therapy. So CBT, as it's often called, is a type of psychotherapy that combines cognitive therapy and behavior therapy, ultimately to help people treat mental health issues. So CBT is based on the idea that how people think about situations in their life can affect their feelings and behaviors. So really the goal of CBT is to help people identify and challenge unhelpful, or maybe even toxic thoughts, learn practical self-help strategies, and change or modify their behavior. And CBT techniques can help identify and challenge those negative thought patterns that you might be having. So it does this by reconstructing these, intrusive thoughts, these negative thoughts, and focusing more on balanced perspectives. If you take away anything from this episode, it's balance. It's balancing yourself out, balancing the emotions, balancing out the stress and anxiety, and ultimately your thoughts too. And that can ultimately reduce the frequency and intensity of rumination. Now, I have not personally been through any kind of CBT, but I have heard amazing things. So if this is something you're interested or you just really need help with that perspective shifting, I highly, highly encourage this. Personally, I have heard wonderful, wonderful things. So Number 6, shift to problem solving, a mindset of problem solving. So really, instead of dwelling on the problem, insert your problem here, the goal is to try and shift your focus to finding solutions. This always makes me laugh a little bit because I always think of the expression, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but the definition of an insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I always feel like that really well applies to ruminating thoughts, because if we are stuck in this vicious cycle, but we are not getting help, if we are not talking it out, if we're not, going through some of these coping tools and trying to find things that work for us to stop these ruminating thoughts, how do you ever expect them to get better or change or stop the ruminating thoughts? It's probably not going to happen, right? You need to break the cycle. And in order to break the cycle, like I've been saying, it's really important to understand where the ruminating thoughts are coming from. Get in there, get nitty gritty, get to the core. I know it hurts sometimes, you guys. I get that, but you got to face it. And getting into that and being like, okay, how can I break this up? How can I problem solve here? How can I just not continue to sit on this, but how can I take some action? And there are people around me that kind of suffer from this, right? They have these ruminating thoughts, but then it's like frustrating for me as a bystander because I'm like, you're not doing anything to change it. You're not taking any action to help yourself or to get yourself feeling better, or that it is like a snail's pace trying to get them to do anything to help themselves. Because at the end of the day, we can't force help upon anyone, but we have to have that motivation and we have to have that drive and that willingness to problem solve, to change, to want to nip these ruminating thoughts in the bud. So breaking down whatever the issue is into smaller, more manageable steps and taking action towards resolving and relieving it. So, for example, let's just use work here again. If you're ruminating about potentially missing a deadline at work, you could create a to-do list of tasks, right? Communicate with your manager, organize your workload, set a realistic timeline for completion, right? If you have a deadline, work backwards. This is what I do and have done in my corporate jobs and world, right? And allowing yourself enough time to where you're not feeling the pinch at the very end. Blocking time off on your calendar to get these things done. Similar with your grief, making sure that you are allowing time for it every day and witnessing it and acknowledging it in your life and not just tamping it down to where it could come up in the form of ruminating thoughts. So by actively taking steps to address the issue, you can redirect your energy from rumination to constructive problem solving. That is what you want. And that ultimately empowers you to make positive changes and move forward with your grief or any situation that might be plaguing you right now, and just a better mindset. Number 6 is distraction. So yes, distraction can be a healthy coping tool. Engaging in activities that require concentration, that can actually help break the cycle of ruminative thinking. Hobbies, physical exercise, reading, spending time with loved ones. Yes, maybe it's even watching a trashy show or something. Maybe it's cooking, maybe it's going out for a drive, right? There are so many ways that you can distract yourself in a healthy way, not to never feel it, not to never deal with it. But I've said this before and I'll say it again, especially with grief, we can't live in our grief 24/7. So we do need to give ourselves a little bit of a break, and it's okay to do that, but doing it in a healthy way, right? This does not mean turning to drugs or alcohol. This does not mean turning to behaviors that could be harmful to ourselves or to others, but ultimately just getting our minds off of it for a little while. That's okay to do. Number 7, writing it down, writing it out. Journaling. There is a reason I created my Losses Become Gains daily journal, which is available on Amazon, by the way. Shameless plug. But seriously, I literally created this specifically because journaling has been such a massive tool for me personally in my grief experience, and I know it has helped others. It's helped people I've coached. I see it all the time on social media that everyone's like, yeah, writing, it's really cathartic. What's great about my journal specifically, I will just mention, is that there are both prompts, but there's also room for free writing. So the choice is yours, whatever you're feeling that day. If you just need a brain dump and just get it out on paper, there you go. You can free write. If you're needing some prompting, if you're struggling to kind of get it out, but you know you need to, then the prompts are there for you, right? But generally speaking, however you want to journal or write it out, it's a very powerful tool for managing ruminating thoughts. It can help clarify your thoughts, it provides a sense of release, and really just creates an opportunity to reflect and gain some new insights and just be very honest with what's coming up for you and how you're feeling on any given day. Hey there, really quick, did you know there are 6 new designs for my Losses Become Gains daily journal? I am seriously so excited to share these with you. I'm calling these new designs my Mediterranean collection because it really speaks to those fun vacation in Europe and Mediterranean vibes, which I personally love. And they're all just so fun, but are also such an impactful part of your daily routine. And the patterns are so awesome. And really, there is something for everyone here. There is a Grecian tile, Seville oranges, Positano stripes, we want to think beachy vibes here, Aperol spritz, ocean waves, and limoncello. As always, you get 3 months of prompts with room for free writing, a section in the beginning to help you tap into who you are and your why, what your goals are, and there are also some clear instructions on how to best utilize this journal. It takes literally 5 minutes a day, and it's really just a simple yet wonderful practice that will truly make a long-lasting impact on your healing and grieving journey. You can find them on Amazon by searching for the Losses Become Gains Daily Journal. Be sure to scroll down to find each pattern or tap the link in the show notes for more. Number 8, I think this one's really important as far as ruminating thoughts go. Look into just like setting a time limit. So what I mean by that is allowing yourself a specific amount of time each day to do that worrying or to think and ponder and consider that issue, but then moving forward, moving on to other activities. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to resolve these ruminating thoughts, but where this can be helpful, at least to start if you're like really stuck in it, is it helps contain the ruminative thoughts and prevent them from taking over your day, which I have witnessed this in people I've coached and people in my personal life. It genuinely can and will take over your entire day if you let it. I've seen people become a shell of a person because of fear and the stress and anxiety that ruminating thoughts can cause. So again, just setting that time limit, being like, okay, I'm going to focus on this right now. I will give it a little bit of time and attention, but then I'm going to move on. And then I'm going to focus on going back to those action tools. I'm going to focus on how I can continue to get myself out of this. Very, very important. Number 9, self-compassion. Touched on this a little bit more with like the self-esteem piece, but also just practicing self-compassion, treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would hopefully offer a friend, acknowledging, like I said, that everyone makes mistakes, things happen, life is really unfair, and it's kind of crappy sometimes. We're all going to experience difficulties and devastating experiences, and it's okay. It's okay to feel sad about that. It's okay to feel angry about that. It's okay to not have all of the answers. And constantly working on building that self-esteem and that self-compassion. I mean, there's so many ways you can do this, but it's just taking care of yourself mentally, physically. It's doing things that you enjoy and that you excel at. And as I always say, thank you, Marie Kondo, that spark joy for you. It is acknowledging yourself and praising yourself for any successes that you have. And you guys, seriously, for grievers out there especially, if that's literally getting out of bed today, okay, That's your success for the day. Trust me, I've been there. I've been in that dark place where literally all I could do that day was just take my dog out because my dog still had to go out. I managed to heat up some frozen food for the day and watch a show that made me feel a little bit better. That was my success, literally, for that day. That's okay. It's all about baby steps, right? It's doing one thing each and every day to bring you a little more peace, to bring you a little bit more of a realistic outlook and perspective on your situation and what is in front of you. And it's breathing into that and taking it literally a day at a time. Last thing here is forgiving yourself for your mistakes. I've touched on this quite a bit today, so I will leave it at that, but I'm going to just reiterate one more time for those in the back, you are human. Self-compassion involves forgiveness. Number 10, understanding your triggers. Each time that you find yourself ruminating, make a mental note of the situation that you're in and see if there is perhaps something that could be triggering that state of mind and those ruminating thoughts for you. So think about, okay, where you are. Is there maybe something in your environment that could be bringing this up? Even what time of day it is. Does it typically come up for you more in the morning? Is it more of an evening thing? Is it randomly in the afternoon? Who was with you? If there is anyone with you that might be, that could be triggering for you. What are you doing? What have you been doing? Are there any actions? Is there any just tasks? Is there things throughout the day that you are doing that, and as you're doing them, you're noticing like, oh, these are where these thoughts are coming up for me. Okay, how can I adjust? Or what does that mean for me, right? And getting curious about that. And any triggers that have kicked off just these unwanted thoughts in general, right? So again, this just involves that awareness piece that we've been talking about. Being aware of these triggers is really, really important because it can really help reduce tendencies to ruminate. And by the way, I'm going to leave this point here, but we have an entire podcast episode about coping with grief triggers specifically. That is episode 15. So I will link it in the show notes, but be sure to go check that out because if you are really struggling with triggers around your grief specifically, or kind of just in general, that's a really good episode to listen to. So triggers are a big one, but also number 11 for coping tools here, seek professional help. I have alluded to this already, so I will not belabor this, but if ruminating thoughts are significantly impacting your life, and I have seen this happen, you guys, seeking help from a therapist or a counselor can be very, very beneficial. Therapy, they can provide support, a third party, right? If it's someone in your maybe immediate circle that is maybe triggering you, or it's maybe you have people you can talk to, but ultimately they have a little too much skin in the game, right? They know you too well. The people that I've spoken about today, high level, that are in my life that deal with ruminating thoughts, they'll often come to me and we'll be bouncing ideas and off of each other and things. But at the end of the day, I'm like, you need to speak to a professional. There's someone else here who needs to give you a different perspective than I can. So on the other side of this coin too, if you are someone who is witnessing someone dealing with ruminating thoughts and it is really affecting their life, maybe it's even really affecting yours because they're not getting the help they need, I just keep encouraging that professional help and really finding the right therapist or counselor or coach. If I can certainly help out with these things too. Sometimes, again, it's just getting a different perspective, but I do really encourage therapy in this case because it's that support, it's those techniques, it's strategies that are tailored to your specific needs. And sometimes with ruminating thoughts, there could be some fairly significant past trauma or something there, or something from childhood, or a multitude of things that could be contributing to these ruminating thoughts. And oftentimes therapy is really the best place to talk that out. Last coping tool here, number 12, setting your own expectations. Expectations is a big thing here, and we actually have yet another episode entirely on this topic. If you are struggling with this or you know someone that's struggling with this, it is episode 65. This one just came out not too long ago. But in terms of expectations, if we set ourselves targets that are maybe too high, we may never meet them. And listen, you guys, I love setting good, high targets for ourselves. Goals are great to have, all good things. I will never discourage that. But again, being realistic too, there's a fine line. There's a good balance that we have to meet, because if we set things a little bit too high, like I said, we might never meet them, but moreover, we can question our self-worth, and it might lead to more of those negative ruminating thoughts like, I will never be good enough. Oh my God, I'm so, this is very aggressive what I'm going to say, but like, I'm so dumb. I'm not good enough. I'll never get this. What's wrong with me? And that can really lead to a lot of negative thoughts. So, with that, it might be time to reevaluate what you realistically can do and just adjusting your own expectations. It's not like you got to bring the bar down, here, but just bring it down maybe a little bit, just so you can be a little bit more gentle with yourself. Like I said, we're only human. And especially if you're grieving, you're dealing with and coping with a lot. So if there was ever a time to be more gentle and give yourself grace, it's now. So, all right, guys, this is a big topic. This is a really huge topic that's really worth a very long conversation and digging into. I just wanted to scratch the surface today. However, what I want you to take away with you today is that, yes, ruminating thoughts can be very overwhelming, and it's great that we are taking the time and holding the space to acknowledge them. What I found in my own experience, and what I would gently recommend to you, is understanding the origins of these thoughts. I am not saying that's easy. I am not saying it's a painless process. It takes going deep sometimes. But sometimes, maybe it's something more obvious. Maybe it is something a little more surface level that can actually be resolved or even like go away quicker than you might think. Either way, it's really important to remember that ruminating thoughts are best dealt with by getting to the root of them and starting to kind of cut them down a little and break them apart there, not at the surface level. And that's why I encourage you to go deep and work with myself or a therapist or whoever you're comfortable with to get there, because oftentimes with ruminating thoughts, there is so much more beyond the surface that we might not even be aware of. And, overall, learning effective coping strategies that can really make a significant difference on your overall health, your mindset, your well-being, how you treat yourself, how you treat your friends, your family, colleagues, everyone around you. And by integrating mindfulness, cognitive restructuring, and that self-compassion into your daily life, you can slowly break free from the cycle of rumination and ultimately cultivate a more peaceful, balanced mind and life. And I just want to remind you, as always, this is a journey. It's an experience, really. And it is okay to seek help along the way. It is okay to have these ruminating thoughts. We all have them. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with that. It is a normal and natural human thing to do. But the key and the goal is to have the courage and motivation to get a handle on them, to not give them the power. And like I was saying earlier, really just to empower yourself to tap back into that sense of calm and ease into your life, because you deserve that, my friend. You deserve all the good things, all the beautiful things in this world. And just remember that myself and this community is always here for you. I have lots of tools and resources available. This will all be linked in the show notes. It's on my website. Shoot me a DM, an email, however I can help you. I want to be here for you. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for hanging out with me in this episode today. If you liked what you heard today or you found it useful, I would so appreciate you sharing it with someone who could maybe use it too, or giving a rating or a review wherever you're listening, so I can help reach other grievers just like you and help them along in their grieving experience too. So thank you so much for being here. I love and appreciate you, and I will see you in the next episode. I am sending you a huge thank you for tuning into today's episode, my friend. I'm so grateful you're here and for the steps you are taking to heal your heart, open your mind, fulfill your soul, learn, grow, and evolve, and move through this crazy thing called life in big, beautiful, impactful ways. Visit lossesbecomegains.com for my blog, ways to work with me, to shop my daily journal, and so much more. And be sure you're following along on Instagram and Facebook at Life with Grief Podcast. I love seeing new faces, meeting new people, hearing your stories, and supporting you however I can. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you haven't left a rating or a review, please do so. I would so appreciate it. Or if you feel so inclined, to share this episode or this podcast with someone who could use it too. I'll catch you in the next episode.